What happens when someone who fights for justice becomes the target of injustice themselves? Two officers had no idea that the woman they arrested would later stand before them, not as a suspect, but as the judge determining their future. On a sunny afternoon in Fort Collins, Colorado, the park was filled with the laughter of children, joggers on the trails, and families enjoying picnics beneath towering oak trees. In the midst of this peaceful scene, Camille, a well-known attorney, sat by the pond, absorbed in a thick book, taking a rare moment to unwind from her busy life. Suddenly, the screech of tires broke her concentration. A police cruiser rolled up, catching the attention of a few onlookers. Two officers stepped out, their expressions stern, exuding authority, their eyes fixed on Camille, the only person sitting alone nearby. "Mom, can we talk to you for a moment?" One officer called, his voice laced with suspicion, not concern. Camille glanced up from her book, her demeanor calm. "Sure," she responded, carefully closing the book. The second officer moved closer, his tone abrupt. "We received a report of suspicious activity in the area. Can you tell us what you're doing here?" Puzzled, Camille raised an eyebrow. "Suspicious activity? I'm just sitting here reading," she said, holding up the book to emphasize her point. But the officers didn't relent. "Can't we see some ID?" demanded the first officer. Camille's pulse quickened, but she stayed composed. "What's this about? What's the reason for this?" she asked. "It's routine," the second officer replied, though his tone suggested otherwise. A small crowd had gathered, exchanging uneasy glances, sensing the imbalance in the interaction. Camille sighed, retrieved her wallet, and handed over her driver's license. "Camille Johnson?" the officer read aloud, almost mocking. "What are you doing here, Miss Johnson?" Camille took a deep breath, maintaining her calm. "I live here. I came to enjoy the park. Is that a problem?" The officer tightened his lips but handed her ID back. Yet, instead of leaving, they lingered, continuing to question her in a way that felt more like an interrogation than a routine check. "Do you always carry a book like that around?" One officer sneered. "Are you waiting for someone, or are you alone?" The other officer added, his hand resting on his belt in a deliberate gesture. Camille had dealt with tense courtroom situations, but this felt different, with a clear power dynamic and a sharp edge to their tone. She chose her words carefully. "I'm not answering any more questions unless you tell me what I'm being accused of," she said firmly. Her refusal seemed to provoke them. "Don't get smart with us," the first officer snapped. "We're just doing our job." "I know the law," Camille replied steadily. "I'm not breaking it by sitting in a public park." But reason wasn't on their agenda. The officer grabbed her arm. "You're resisting," he claimed, despite Camille not moving. "What are you doing?" she exclaimed, startled. The crowd murmured as a man began recording. "Stop resisting," the officer repeated loudly, almost as if for the benefit of the growing onlookers. Camille's heart raced as the cold metal of handcuffs clicked around her wrists. Humiliation and frustration burned inside her, but she kept her composure. The officers led her toward their cruiser, ignoring the crowd's questions. Camille locked eyes with a young woman holding up her phone. Without a word, they exchanged a silent plea for documentation of the injustice. As the cruiser door slammed shut, Camille knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. In the backseat, Camille's mind raced. She had spent years defending others in court, but now she was on the other side. The absurdity of the situation struck her, but there was no humor, only anger. The ride to the station was oppressively quiet, save for the police radio's static. Camille stared out the window, the fluorescent lights in the station buzzing as she was booked and fingerprinted. She was then placed in a small, cold holding cell. "Enjoy your stay," one officer mocked as he shut the cell door. Camille sat on a bench, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, replaying the park incident in her mind. How did something so peaceful turn into this? The answer was bitterly clear: prejudice. Hours passed before anyone spoke to her again. A young officer approached with a clipboard. "Miss Johnson, you're being charged with resisting arrest and obstructing a peace officer." "On what grounds?" Camille demanded, her voice sharp. "You can discuss that in court," the officer responded flatly. She exhaled slowly, knowing the charges were baseless, but also understanding the long and difficult fight ahead. Eventually she was released on bail. As she stepped outside, the cool night air contrasted sharply with the stifling environment inside. She saw Marissa, her colleague and friend, waiting for her. "Are you okay?" Marissa asked, concern and relief on her face. "I'm fine," Camille replied, though her slight tremor betrayed her words. "I'm not letting this slide," Camille said, breaking the silence. "Not this time." Marissa's grip on the steering wheel tightened. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking I'm tired of this happening," Camille replied. "I have the tools, the knowledge, and the resources to fight back." That night, Camille sat at her kitchen table surrounded by legal documents, her hands trembling with determination as she outlined a civil rights lawsuit against the officers and the department. The days turned to weeks, and the community rallied behind her. The video of her arrest, captured by the young woman in the park, went viral, and messages of support flooded in. Camille's resolve only grew stronger. Her law firm had initially hesitated to support her public case, worried about its potential impact on their reputation, but Camille remained firm. She explained that this was not just about her. It was about setting a legal precedent. As reporters reached out for interviews, Camille declined, focusing solely on building her case. She wasn't looking for media attention, she was focused on justice. Yet at night, the weight of the situation crept in. She replayed the arrest over and over, thinking about how easily things could have escalated. It fueled her resolve to keep going. One evening, Marissa brought takeout to Camille's place. "You've been at this for hours," she said gently. "I don't have a choice," Camille replied, not looking up from her laptop. "You know this is bigger than just a legal battle, right?" Marissa said, studying her friend's face. "I know," Camille responded, finally meeting her friend's gaze. "That's why I can't afford to lose." Camille's preparation was meticulous. She combed through similar cases, pulling precedents and gathering evidence to dismantle the officer's claims. She enlisted trusted colleagues, building a team of lawyers who shared her commitment to justice. It wasn't just about the courtroom, though. Camille attended town halls, listened to others who had experienced similar injustices, and even spoke at a local college about the importance of accountability. One afternoon, a stranger approached her after a meeting. "Miss Johnson, I just wanted to thank you for standing up for us," the woman said, her voice cracking. Camille smiled softly, her throat tight. "I'm just doing what I can," she replied. The pressure was mounting as the case gained more attention. Camille could feel the weight of the community's support and the responsibility it carried. Then came the news that the officers had filed a motion to dismiss the case, a standard tactic to delay proceedings. But as her attorney explained the next steps, he hesitated before revealing something unexpected. Camille had been assigned as the judge for one of the officers' cases. The irony was staggering. Camille sat back, processing the revelation. She had prepared for weeks to fight these officers in court, and now she was expected to preside over a case involving them. For a moment, she wondered if she could remain impartial, but then she thought about everything they had put her through and the opportunity she now had to show what real justice looked like. In the courtroom, the atmosphere shifted when Camille walked in, her black robe flowing behind her. The officers Carter and Daniels were at the defendant's table, their faces draining of color as they realized the woman they had arrested was now their judge. Camille paused, letting the weight of the moment settle before proceeding with the case. She remained professional, but the tension in the room was palpable. The officers seemed unsettled, their usual confidence fading as the proceedings went on. During a break, they whispered nervously, questioning how this could be happening, but their lawyer reminded them to stay focused. This wasn't a setup, it was a consequence of their actions. As the trial continued, Camille's impartiality held firm. She listened carefully to the evidence, despite the irony of the situation. The officers' justifications for their actions were weak, and their discomfort was palpable. By the end of the day, it was clear that the case against them was strong. The following week, Camille delivered her ruling. She acknowledged that the officers had abused their power, and their actions warranted consequences: mandatory suspension, retraining, and a formal disciplinary record. While the ruling was firm, it also allowed for the possibility of reform. As the courtroom emptied, Carter hesitated before speaking to Camille. "Your Honor, I'm sorry," he said, his voice low. It wasn't enough to undo the harm, but it was a start. Camille nodded but offered no absolution. True change would come through actions, not apologies. Later, Camille attended a community meeting. The gratitude she received from the people moved her, reminding her why this fight mattered. The case had sparked meaningful conversations about transparency and accountability, and Camille used her platform to advocate for reform. The case had become a symbol of the ongoing fight for justice, and Camille remained committed to pushing for change. Though the system wasn't perfect, she felt a renewed sense of hope, because with enough voices, progress could be made. As she stood on the courthouse steps, watching young activists gather for a peaceful rally, Camille knew the fight for justice was far from over. But she also knew that with determination, change was possible. In a world where injustice can feel overwhelming, Camille's story reminds us, true change begins when we refuse to stay silent. Let's keep fighting for what's right. Camille's story is just one of many, but it reminds us that we all have the power to stand up, speak out, and create real change. Together, we can make a difference. Don't let this be the last time we talk about justice. Stay engaged, stay inspired, and let's keep fighting for what's right.